Today on Lockdown Red Wings, we bring on Tony Ferrari of the Hockey News to continue our 2022 draft profiles. Today's is right-handed defenseman Simon Nemec.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back to the Lockdown Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty also hosts over at Locked On Tigers. He is also a freelance writer for the Detroit News, and I'm a producer over at 97.1 The Ticket. And today, we bring on recurring guests, one of our favorite guests to bring onto the podcast, Tony Ferrari, writer for the Hockey News. Tony, how you doing today, man?
I'm good. I'm happy to join you guys. It's always fun to jump on the Locked On Network with you guys.
Are we the best Locked On pod that you come on?
I'll say this: you're not the worst. I think we all know what the worst is, without saying it.
Wow! Holy cow! All right,
I'm clipping that and I'm sending it to one pod in particular. Let me tell you.
Please don't. I'm gonna get inundated with messages from them, and I don't want it.
Even better, Scotty, just send it to all of the other podcasts and let them figure out who.
Right? Yeah, I'll just send it to the group we have and be like, "Wow, look what Tony said, guys!" And then everyone just fight over who he was talking about.
If that's what ends up happening, I'll get messages from a couple that I haven't been on. Like, what do we do?
So today we bring you on to help us profile the 2022 draft prospect, Simon Nemec. The Slovakian is 18 years old. He started the season 17 years old, playing professional hockey in Slovakia, 6'1", 192 pounds. He's a right-handed shot, which is highly coveted amongst many NHL teams. This past year with, and I'm going to try my best, HK Nitra.
Yep.
That's pretty simple, so I hope I didn't butcher it too bad. He had 26 points.
That,
Thank you, Scotty. Appreciate it. 1 goal, 25 assists in 39 games played. In the playoffs, he had 17 points. How did he had 5 goals and 12 assists in the playoffs in 19 games. That's the first thing that stands out to me. He had 1 goal in the regular season and he had 5 in the playoffs. How did that work out?
I think he just had a really good playoffs, to be completely honest. Like, he's not afraid to shoot. He's really offensively creative and everything. So I think as he just kind of matured throughout the season, his scoring pace picked up towards the end of the year and then just continued on into the playoffs. And I think the fact of the matter is, in the playoffs, he was just comfortable trying stuff. And at the end of the day, in the Slovak league, where the defense is questionable and backchecking is optional, it's pretty easy for a guy to get creative and stuff like that. So I think there's some kind of smoke and mirrors going on here with some of the point production he has. But at the end of the day, he's the highest point producing defenseman in that league and in the history of draft eligibles. And I mean, we saw a guy like Brant Clark last year go there and put up numbers that were almost as good, but not quite. So Simon Nemec doing what he did this year was pretty impressive, and it'll be fun to kind of see if he can translate that to the next level.
Well, go ahead.
No, one of the fascinating things when you first start diving in on him is he was like a star at 15. Like, he's like one of the, I think I saw he was the youngest person to ever score, record a point or something in the highest league over there. Like, how long has he been on the map? How long has he been such a big deal?
Well, he's been a name that I've been hearing for at least a few years now, at least since the 2019 draft season. So he's a guy that you're starting to hear about a little bit back then, and he's impressive skater. He's got all the tools, and you've kind of watched him mature a little bit over the last few years. So he's definitely a guy that's been on the map a while, but he's not in the CHL and everything like that. So unlike Shane Wright, he wasn't getting that overexposure. He wasn't getting those people watching him and really nitpicking his game until this year, which is what most draft eligibles get. So it's kind of been interesting for him to be a name that was there, but because of the league he played in, he wasn't really on the prominent screen for everybody all year or for the last few years.
Well, actually, so that jumps ahead to actually one of my later questions, but since it's a topic we're bringing up now, the league that he plays in, him producing at the clip he did produce at in that Slovakian league is still very impressive. But how big of an impact do you think that's going to have? He's still slotted to be a top 10 draft pick in most boards. Some have him go as high as a top 3 pick. But how much of an impact do you think the league he played in is going to have in his overall draft stock?
I think it plays a role, certainly. I think you look at a guy like him, and I think there is a lot of risk with how much he'll translate to the next level, because it's not like he's a guy that has this stout. Like, we look back at Moritz Seider in his draft year, for instance, and he was putting up some decent numbers in the DEL, but it was his defensive game that seemed to get everyone attracted to him. Despite him having some offensive game, and up until that season, he was kind of an offensive defenseman. So his team asked him to play a little bit more defense, and he did that to an excellent level and got drafted by the Wings in the top 10. So you look at Simon Nemec in comparison, and he's playing in another obscure league a little bit and putting up huge offensive numbers is what Nemec did this year. And his defensive game isn't what you really want to draft him for. So I think there is some concern, because if that offense doesn't translate, that top 10 pick that could get taken with, that he might get taken with, might be a little bit high for what he actually is.
Well, that leads me to, so the Red Wings are drafting 8th overall, and on most boards, Nemec or Jiricek are the 1 and 2 on the defensive rankings. Where do you see him going in the top 10, and do you believe he could be available for the Red Wings at 8?
I do. I think he'll be there at 8 probably, and I think he goes anywhere between 5 and 10. I look at him and I have him as my second highest rated defenseman, but a guy like Kevin Korchinski, I don't think is very far behind. A guy like Gleb Trikazov, I think you could make an argument for. And they're or not Gleb Trikazov, sorry, Pavel Mintyukov, the other Russian player in this draft class. But no, like there's guys that you can make an argument for the second best defenseman in this draft class. And I think Jiricek's kind of solidified that number 1 spot among the defenders in consensus rankings and everything. So I think Nemec is the head of the class for number 2, but I don't think it's a surefire thing, because like I said, there's a lot of risk with him. And I think the skill, the upside is obviously there. The skating ability is really fun and everything, but is he as surefire as someone would hope for a top 10 pick? I don't really know if that's there.
What? No, I mean, so I guess we can just start getting into, unless you have anything else about the league or anything, Brian, but his game specifically. And you said earlier that his defense, like maybe you wouldn't be drafting him for his defense. Talk about in his defensive game specifically what he excels in and what maybe he lacks.
He's a really good skater, and he has size. Like he's 6'1", almost 200 pounds. The defensive kind of reads aren't necessarily there all the time. He's really inconsistent in his own zone. He's pretty good at jumping passes and breaking up passing lanes and stuff like that. But there are so many times where you're watching him play defense and you're just like, oh yeah, like this is a kid playing road hockey defense. Like he doesn't quite know exactly what he's doing. He's figuring it out still. And I think that plays into the fact that the league he plays in is kind of a bit more of a dumpster fire league, if we're being honest. Like it's not as good a league as the Finnish leagues or the Swedish leagues. So you're looking at him tear up this league offensively and then still kind of have these moments where he struggles defensively, whether it's he's just not getting back in time or he's kind of misreading a gap and getting walked along the boards, or the guy cuts across his face to the middle. He doesn't have that gear to get up to that next level to make that stop sometimes. And that's a concern for me, because I do like Nemec's tool set, but sometimes the reads and everything, especially in his own end, are a little concerning.
So you mentioned that he is primarily a more offensive-oriented defenseman based on what you just said. Do you think that would fit a need for the Detroit Red Wings, who are pretty well stockpiled in defensemen in their pool? Obviously, they had Seider up this year, is going to win the Calder, not even if, he will win the Calder. And you have Edvinsson and Wallander on the way as well. Albert Johansson as well. Do you think that the Red Wings need another defenseman? And then, of course, the play style he plays, do you think that's a need that the Red Wings have to fill as well?
Well, I think that any team could use another defenseman. If a guy like Nemec is there at 8 and you don't have a forward that you'd really rather take ahead of him, I think you do take Nemec, because he does have that upside. He has that flair for the offensive game and some offensive creativity. There are concerns, but I mean, every player in this draft class, it seems, has concerns. Maybe, I mean, even going up to the first overall pick, right? So it's a really weird, unique draft class that, in my opinion, has been the most affected by the pandemic, with their last 2 seasons, their D-2 and D-1 being greatly affected by COVID and everything. And a guy like Nemec, while he's got to play a lot, it's still a little bit concerning. Again, we've seen at the World Championships, he's done a great job. And despite being 18 and in his 17-year-old season, essentially, he's the top producing, or second top producing U19 defender at the World Championships. He still does a lot of really good things. It's going to be interesting to kind of see what his career pans out as, because it's a risk and reward pick with this guy.
So when we come back, though, when we begin segment 2, we'll continue this conversation. I do want to ask your opinion, Tony, on who you believe is the best comparable for Simon Nemec that's currently in the NHL. But first, I got to talk to you guys today about Athletic Greens. This next partner has a product you need to use literally every day. You need to start taking AG1 because with one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food sourced superfoods, that's a mouthful, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. The special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all of those things. It's lifestyle friendly. Whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, or artificial anything, while still tasting good. It costs less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. Athletic Greens has over 7,000 five-star reviews recommended by professional athletes such as Detroit Tigers starting pitcher Tarek Skubal, trusted by leading health experts such as Tim Ferriss and Michael Gervais. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. I'm going to go back to that. Whole food sourced superfoods. It's a tough one for me. It trips me out. Oh, you don't struggle with it, Scotty?
No, my Athletic Green ads are great. So
yeah. I'll let you read them from now on. How about that?
I didn't say that. I didn't say it was a problem with them.
I mean, since you're so good at it, I'll let you do it.
I just said I was better. I didn't say you were bad.
Well, I mean, might as well, if it's a strength of yours, we might as well play into that strength. So, we wouldn't want to short the people a good ad read.
We could.
Okay. He says we could. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are joined by Tony Ferrari of the Hockey News as we bring you our draft profile of Simon Nemec. And before the break, I teased it, Tony. I want to know, and I kind of teased it before the break, so I could give you some time to think if you didn't have one already. Is there a modern day NHL comparable to Simon Nemec's game currently in the league?
Well, first off, I want to say thank you for putting me on the spot. I love that. It's my favorite thing in the world. Second of all, I don't like making direct comparables because I hate comparables in general. No player is exactly the same as any other player, I think. But I'll give you 2 names that I think could be a bit of a weird range for a guy like Simon Nemec. I look at him and I go, on the top end, you could get a Morgan Rielly out of this kid. I think there's a reality where he's a really good offensive defenseman. He figures out the transition game because there are some issues I have with that I'll get into in a few minutes. I'll bet when we talk about that. And then on the other end, you get a Shane Gostisbehere, who's not a bad defenseman, but we all kind of saw some of the issues he had in Philly. We all saw some of the issues even this year in Arizona, where, yeah, you're getting him for one reason and one reason only, really. So there's a range of what this kid could be, especially because there is so much uncertainty coming out of his game with coming out of Slovakia, not really having any high level competition against him. And like I said, when he's faced competition of international play and at both the men's and the junior level, he's done a pretty good job. Like, he hasn't looked out of place by any means at the World Championships right now this year. He's got 6 points in 7 games, and that's a pretty good scoring line for a defenseman, especially at his age. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of what he does, but I still do think he ends up like somewhere between Morgan Rielly and Shane Gostisbehere.
So we've talked about the defense, and you just kind of alluded to it. We can just get into that right now, I guess. What on the offensive end, what makes him such a good offensive defenseman, and what areas do you still think, like you kind of alluded to there, that he still needs to improve on?
Well, I'll start with the transition game because obviously transition leads to offense. And I think the big thing with him in transition is he's a very good skater. I don't think that's an issue. He changes direction well. He has good four-way mobility. I don't think there's any issues in that regard. But one of the things that I do kind of worry about, and this was something pointed out by Will Scouch, who I know you guys know as well, and this was something as soon as he pointed out to me early in the year, I couldn't stop seeing it. And he has this thing where, and this is why I brought up Morgan Rielly, because Rielly does it sometimes, where he'll get the puck up the ice, but it's not like he's necessarily puck handling it. It's almost like he's pushing it 10 feet in front of him and skating onto it, pushing it 10 more feet and skating onto it.
The shovel method.
Exactly. He's shoveling it up the ice.
That's what Brian does.
Exactly, is what I do.
Right?
I don't know how to stick handle.
So instead of stick handling, he's kind of just sending it to an area and hoping he can get there. And we've seen Morgan Rielly do it successfully. We've seen other NHL defensemen do it successfully and kind of adapt their game as they grow and mature into their own bodies and everything. But Simon Nemec does that a lot. And that kind of concerns me because you shove that puck 5 extra feet or even 2 extra feet, especially in the NHL, there's going to be a defenseman or a forward there to cut that off, turn the play around, and then you're stuck in no man's land behind the forward that's attacking up ice. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can kind of work that out of his defensive game or if he can kind of refine it a little bit more. So he's not necessarily sending such far shovel passes to himself. It's more controlled and refined and drawn in a little bit. But as for the offensive zone, he's got all of the tools you want to see. He's got a pretty decent shot from the point. I don't want to say he's got a bomb or anything because that would be a little unfair to him, but he does a really nice wrist shot, gets it off really quickly. He moves well along the blue line. I wish he'd be a little bit more aggressive with his movement at the offensive blue line because to me, that's the big difference between him and Juracek's defensive game is Juracek is willing to go from side to side on that umbrella, kind of get up and into the dot and kind of move up to the point again and back down to the other dot. It's really interesting the way Juracek moves aggressively like that. And Simon Nemec arguably has a better mobility profile, but he doesn't use it as effectively. He doesn't use it as aggressively, and that's something I'd really like to see from Nemec. But you did start to see a little bit more in the offensive zone as the year came on. And again, he put up a ton of points this year in the Slovak League. In the playoffs, he was almost a point per game defenseman over 19 games as he had 17 points, which is kind of ridiculous in any league. So it's there. Like, he has the ability to do it. I just wish he'd do it a little bit more. As for his passing profile in the offensive zone, he does a really good job of passing pucks high to low. He does a really good job of distributing from the point in making things happen for his teammates. But I do think I'd like to see him get a little bit more aggressive, be a little bit more daring, try some more things. And in the Slovak League, I almost feel like you should be doing that because
of all leagues.
It's the Slovak League, right? It's not like he's playing in the Finnish men's league or something like that. He's playing in a league that he probably does have physical advantages over a lot of these guys, despite being so much younger. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can, like I said, there's a lot of refinement that's needed, but there's the base level of everything's kind of already there for him.
So that leads me to the next question then. What do you think his floor/ceiling could possibly be on an NHL roster?
I think realistically, like, there's a chance he's a top pair defenseman. I probably wouldn't put my money on it, but that offensive upside is intriguing. Like, you look at a guy like Morgan Rielly, and I think we all kind of look at him and go, is he a number one? Is he a number two? Like, is he a guy that if you have a couple of number twos, him, Brody, Muzzin, does that work? Maybe, but you don't have a true surefire number one guy. There's a debate there. And I think Nemec could kind of maybe get to that spot. But realistically, I see him as a second pairing guy who does a lot of things and probably works a top end power play. So it's going to be interesting because if he does go to a team like Detroit and stuff, we saw what Moritz Seider can do on the power play. We've seen what Simon Edvinsson can do in the power play over in Europe.
Right.
We've got guys like William Wallander, who I think has some power play potential. Albert Johansson, who's got a ton of offensive flair and skill. So it's going to be interesting to see where he would fit in that regard on a team like Detroit. But the potential's there. And I think that's what's really intriguing about Nemec is there's so much potential with this kid. You look at him and you go, man, if we could refine this and we can coach this out of him and we can kind of get this trait and worked out, you get a really good player. But at the same time, if you can't refine that, if you can't coach this trait out of him, then you're kind of worrying about, oh man, did we waste a number 8 pick on a guy that probably could have went in the 20s and been a little bit more realistic. And I do have him in my top 10 on my board because I do value upside so much, but I do acknowledge that there's risk with this guy. I think there's a ton of talent, but again, you're always risking a guy like coming from a strange league, coming from all this offensive prowess. His defensive game needs a lot of refinement. There's a lot of ifs, but if those things break, like, this could be a really fun player.
That's really interesting too. Hearing, because last week we did Matthew Savoy with Sam McGilligan, and we keep hearing the same things over and over again about this year's draft class, is that these players could be really good, and they also could end up being complete busts. It feels like this year, more so than earlier years, past years, there's such a variety in that top 10. And you really don't know outside of one, maybe two, who's going to be a genuine bona fide, like, top line talent. I won't even say elite, but top line talent in the NHL. It just seems like even your top 10, your 3 through 10 seems to be this year so hit and miss.
Yeah, I think you have Shane Wright obviously at the top of the draft, and I think everyone's pretty comfortable with him being a top 6 center, a guy that probably will end up being a decent number 1 center at the NHL level. Like you look at a 1-2 punch of him and Nick Suzuki in Montreal, and you're like, okay, that's pretty respectable. Like two guys who play at both ends of the ice and put up 70 plus points probably together. And then you go down and you get Logan Cooley and David Juracek. I think those are the next guys, and Euro Slafkovsky probably fits into that group as well. And then after that, it's like, what's your stylistic choice? And I think you're seeing that on public boards. You're going to see that on draft day. You're going to really get a feel for what teams value. And I think a guy like Simon Nemec, if a team values that offensive upside, if a team values the flair and the ability to kind of the raw tools and understanding like this is a ball of clay that I can mold, then you're going to see him go at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But if there's teams that kind of doubt that and worry about that, you can see him fall a little bit and go at 12 or 10. Realistically, I do think he's probably going to go in that 5, 6, 7, 8 range, but it will be interesting to kind of see what team strategies are this year.
Do you think that like a team that maybe is overload's probably too dramatic of a word because I'm not sure anybody is that, but you think a team that might have a ton of like defensive defensemen maybe goes like, oh, like this would be fun to pair with one of these guys. Like, let's take a shot on them.
Yeah, it's certainly worth it because look at Detroit, right? You already mentioned right. Edvinsson and Seider, and both of them play excellent two-way games. I think both of them have the ability to be defensive guys that shut guys down. And we saw so many times this year with Moritz Seider just having ability. Like there's a few plays that stick out in my mind with him this year. I mean, him punching Sidney Crosby in the face and really just not taking any shit from him and doing what he did to him. And then there was another play when he was playing against the Oilers and he just rode McDavid down to the red line below the goal line. And it's like, okay, like if he can do those things, like there's that defensive profile that you love. And obviously he's got the offensive game as well. Not many defensemen put up as many points as he did in their rookie season. So if you get a guy like that and you can pair him with Simon Nemec, yeah, it's probably going to be worth it. It's possible. But I look at Detroit personally and I'm like, Edvinsson brings a lot of what Nemec brings. Moritz Seider has shown the ability to be an offensive guy. Albert Johansson is as much a gamble as Simon Nemec in a lot of ways. So it's like, man, like, and I still have a love for William Wallander that I think this guy can turn out to be a really high-end defenseman that people aren't really talking about because he was drafted kind of later than some expected. So
he just won U20 player of the year.
Yeah. I mean, no big deal. Same thing that our boy won there last year. So it's like,
that Detroit is our boy, by the way, on the train first. Let it be known. On the train first.
Exactly. So it's like, do you necessarily need Simon Nemec? And I don't necessarily know if there's a need. Like if I'm Detroit and I'm looking at this draft board and say I have Frank Nazar, Joakim Kamel, and Simon Nemec all sitting there at 8, and I'm like, who do I want? I'm probably going to lead him with one of the forwards.
Yeah. I want to ask you about that too. Your personal draft board there in that top 10 range. But first, I got to talk to you guys today about our partners at BetOnline. Continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty and I are joined by Tony Ferrari of the Hockey News. And we are breaking down the draft profile, if I can speak, on Simon Nemec, or is it Simon Nemec?
I've heard it pronounced both ways. I've had people tell me it's spelt differently too. So I'm going with Simon. It might be Simon.
Potential marketing in Detroit of having a defensive line of Simon and Simon/Simon.
I mean,
do you think that plays on draft?
I mean, if we're trying to get into Steve Yzerman's mind, I don't necessarily know what's going on in there. The guy's a freaky genius, so he might be like, you know what, we need the Simons. We need that second pairing because it's gonna be fun. I
mean, if you want to look at like trends for Steve Yzerman, I think Nemec does fit some of them in physical traits. I mean. Yzerman loves to draft guys who are over 6 foot. He's already 192 pounds at the age of 18, so hopefully would be over 200 pounds by the time he's league ready. Yzerman loves his big defenseman, and now while 6'1" isn't necessarily like it's like probably average in the NHL. He tends to every single defenseman he tends to take is like 6'3", 6'4". I mean, Seider and Edvinsson are 6'4" and 5, and then you got Elmer Soderblom on the offensive side of things. There's like 6'7".
Just the behemoth.
Yzerman likes his big guys, but I don't think that'd play that much. I tend to agree with you, Tony, that the Red Wings will more than likely be looking at a forward unless like Juracek is available at 8 for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Which leads me to my question: how do you see like that top 10 playing out in regards to the Red Wings? Who do you think that? And obviously, there's so many ifs. It's if this player gets taken here, if this player gets taken here. So I guess if you were to mock a player to the Red Wings at 8, who do you think it would be?
Oh, it's tough because I'm looking at my board, and right now Shane Wright's kind of in a little bit of a tier of his own at the top, and then I have Cooley, Juracek, and Slafkovsky kind of right in that next group, and then I have 3 forwards that are probably a little bit higher than on some people's boards, but I look at them and I'm like, if things break right for these guys, they'd be studs, and that's Brad Lambert, Matthew Savoy, and Frank Nazar.
All y'all are big on Lambert.
Yeah,
let me tell you.
We had McGilligan and Scouch on, and they both are so high on Lambert.
Yeah,
and the thing is with Lambert, like obviously the production isn't there, but you know who else the production wasn't there on?
Right,
boy Lucas Raymond.
Yeah,
and obviously they're different style of players and everything, and Lambert does profile a little bit more of a center than Raymond did. So it's like, man, like the talent is there, the skills, everything he does is there, but that team he was on at the start of the year was pretty bad. The team he was on at the end of the year was really bad.
Yeah.
And credit to Joakim Kamel for being able to produce on that team. He was also given a lot more minutes and given a lot less responsibility in transition and a lot less responsibility defensively. So a guy like Brad Lambert didn't necessarily get that just, hey, go play offense, score a couple goals like Joakim Kamel did. So I think when you look at their transition game, when you look at their defensive game, and Brad Lambert's defensive game isn't perfect, but it's better than Joakim Kamel's. I have him ahead of guys like that. And I think Lambert's a guy that you have that upside again, similar to Simon Nemec, right? Like this whole next group for me after Nazar is Nemec and Kamel and Philip Machar. And then there's Kevin Korchinski and Gleb Trikazov. Like all of those guys are gambles. You're rolling the dice a little bit on all those guys. But at the same time, if they turn out, all of those guys could be real like top end forwards, top end defensemen. Like they could be guys that play meaningful minutes in your top 6 or top 4. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see it. But if I'm just kind of looking at the draft and I go, who is Detroit going to draft? I still have this feeling about Frank Nazar. I think he's fallen down on a couple boards. There's a few teams that maybe don't like him necessarily, but the motor on this kid, the energy, the skill, the offensive pursuit, his ability to just attack play in every zone. I think that's what Detroit loves. They value guys like that. A guy that, even though maybe his defensive positioning isn't always perfect, he's making a legitimate effort on every play for the most part. And I think Frank Nazar is a guy that I look at in Detroit, and there's a part of me that's like, he's a hometown kid. I think that would be awesome too. His dad grew up when he grew up, his dad was the parking attendant at the garage at the Joe Louis Arena and stuff. So it's like there's a really good story there, and the talent is unreal. So if I'm mocking a player to Detroit, Nazar's probably my guy. But if they don't go him, I could see anybody really. Like this is going to be a really interesting draft to see how it falls, because one team has to like a guy and he's going to go higher than expected. So that's really all it takes. And I've said it many times this year with how much divergence there is this year. There's probably more variance this year than any year. I know Will Scouts tracks certain rankings and everything, and he was saying it's almost a full standard deviation higher this year than it normally is in terms of the last 4 years of where guys are ranking in terms of variance. So it's really interesting to see kind of how much different people value different things. And you're going to see that on the draft floor. And if a team values that upside, you could see Nazar go at 5. The team values some kind of goal scoring. You could see Kamel go at 5. It's going to be interesting to see who values what and where they all go.
Scotty, do you have any more questions on Nemec?
Not on Nemec.
Okay, because I want to talk to you, Tony, man to man. How vindicated do you feel about Moritz Seider right now?
I mean, I'm not saying I was super right, but I was more right than everyone else. So it's like,
Correct.
whatever.
You were correct.
But no, honestly, like seeing a guy like that do what he's done so far in the NHL in the 1 year, obviously, and see everything he's done in Europe and every league he's played in, it's nice to see, because I remember in his draft year, he had that, I read an interview, I translated it from German, which is always easy to do. But his coach said, like, this is an offensive defenseman that we asked to play defensively, and then he excelled in that role. So seeing him kind of come in with a little bit more offense than people expected, seeing him come in as a refined number one defenseman and truly go, hey, Detroit, like I've got you, and take over the number one role for the next 15 years. Like I love it. I love the kid. He's so much fun. I've talked with him a couple of times, and he's just a great person to talk to. Like he is a personality in the NHL, and much like people are promoting Trevor Zegras, I think Detroit's done a really good job, especially with the Mojo show and stuff like that.
That's
get
a fun
this
show.
Get this kid out there, get this kid up on posters, get this kid's interviews out there, let him have some fun, let him rap Eminem, like let him do stuff. Like this kid does everything that you'd want to see from a personality in the NHL, and there's potential for this kid to be a legitimate star in the league.
Oh man, we have talked about it. I really wanted to just bring it up just so we could talk Moritz Seider again, because I cannot get enough talking Moritz Seider. I remember when we had you on earlier in the season, and that was one of the sticking points we were talking about at that moment was how his offensive upside was surprising Scotty and I, because we had heard about how good of a defensive defenseman was, and that you said the same thing then that you're saying now. Like his coach asked him to play defensive, and then he excelled, so everyone got to know him as that. And just like this season, like almost as good, if not better than his defensive side, was just how well in the offensive zone he excelled. I mean, he played both special teams, power play, penalty kill. He was the top line defenseman, led the team in minutes. I mean, the guy did everything at 19 years old, and then eventually turned 20 years old, turning 21 years old. Absolutely just mind-boggling how good he was this season. And I just, credit to you for being one of the few people high on him in his draft class, because everyone, including myself, that year was like, that seemed like a reach, right? Like, who's this kid from the German league?
Yeah, and honestly, like, even when he was drafted, I was like, oh, like someone's thinking the same as me. And I think I thought it was a little crazy, to be honest, because this guy has all the skating ability, he has all the tools and everything that you want to see, and obviously he's panned out pretty well so far. So it's like, man, like I remember after the draft, and I was calming guys down. I was going on all the Detroit podcasts and being like, all right, guys, I get that it was a little high. It was probably even a little higher than I was expecting him to go, but this kid might turn out. This kid might reward us all for that high pick that he got. So, man, Steve Yzerman looks like a genius, and I'll pretend to ride on those. And I'll ride on those coattails.
I was about to say, you were like, man, somebody was thinking the same thing as me. Well, yeah, the GM of the Red Wings was thinking the same thing as you. So that's a pretty good thing to be able to know that you and Steve Yzerman were on the same page.
I'm not saying we're best friends, but like whatever.
No, it's absolutely phenomenal, and he and Raymond were such bright spots for us Red Wings fans. The first half of the season, the Red Wings were competitive, 500 hockey team, but the wheels really came off after the All-Star break. But Seider especially remained a bright spot, something to look forward to night in and night out. And it's just, I really am super excited to see if he can further develop his game next season. Because think about how amazing he was his rookie year. If that's him at 20 years old, 21 years old, imagine him at 21 and 22 years old. Like, it's just, how much higher can he go?
That's just it, right? Like, I'm curious to see if he gets any Norris votes this year. I don't know if he's going to get many, if any, because there was a lot of really good defensemen this year. Guys were scoring almost 100 points this year. It was ridiculous. But I think his name is going to be on the ballot. I think like he's going to be at the bottom somewhere. Someone's going to give him a 5th place vote or a 4th place vote or something like that. But I think he gets there. Yeah, I think someone's going to do that. I think someone's going to go, he probably isn't really a top 5 guy, but let's give him that because of the season he did have. And someone's going to do it. Exactly, right? Someone's going to do it. So how many Norris votes does he get this year versus how many more he gets next year? And I have a feeling next year he's going to get a few more.
I mean, he was paired with either Danny DeKeyser or Jordan Osterley for like the entirety of the season.
The murderer's row of defensemen there. Jordan Osterley and friggin' Danny DeKeyser. You want to know how good Dylan Osterley is? I know I just did it again. I called him Dylan Osterley on a podcast for like the whole time. And afterwards they're like, hey, by the way, it's Jordan. And I'm like, oh yeah, it is Jordan. 100%. Yeah.
It's okay. We've already improved our defensive core. We signed Steven Kampfer. So, that's
beautiful.
That's more
pair him up with Seider, right?
Damn right.
Scotty, any final thoughts, man?
Tony, thoughts on elite prospect defenseman Brian Fisher potentially coming out of retirement?
Why did I know you were going to bring that in?
I'm going to go with probably shouldn't.
Wow.
I agree with that.
And I'm only saying it because much like me, a man that follically challenged entering the league, he's probably going to get roasted far too often.
Follically challenged.
It's not going to be a good thing for his ego. So I'd probably recommend just not doing it. You know,
Somebody's
play the
looking out
beer
for my
leagues,
well-being, man.
dominate the beer leagues in Michigan, and just take that pride with you.
I don't even dominate beer leagues in Michigan.
He's an enforcer, so the point
not
for
even
junction
that.
is really there. He gets in a lot of fights.
Can't
Tony,
wait to see him and Giovanni Smith on a line together.
Oh
Damn
man, let's go. Tony, thank you so much. What are you working on right now? Plug your stuff. Let everyone know where they can find you.
Oh, it's the end of the year, so I've got a ton of Game Tape with Tony videos coming out. So it's just me interviewing prospects and going over some of their video with them, talking about why they scored a goal this way, what they were thinking on a given play, and what mistakes they were making and stuff like that.
By the way, those videos are awesome.
It's a ton of fun because I like to joke with the guys, and then we talk music and movies and stuff like that afterwards. So it's not all hockey. You get to know them a little bit on the personal side as well. And then I've got my rankings coming out probably June 10th or 13th. That's kind of the set dates that I'm kind of thinking right now, and that'll be a top 100 with super detailed scouting reports on the top 32, pretty detailed scouting reports on the rest, and then probably some honorable mentions. It's gonna be a big boy, and I know Rowan from Detroit Twitter has been bugging me all year for it, and
That sounds about right.
Yeah, I mean, typical of him, right? Garbage human being he is. But no, I told him, I'm like, man, you got to see. He's like, I got a 6-hour flight like a couple days before that. I'm like, well, maybe I'll leak it to you early, and you can try to push through the massive workload that's going to be. So it's going to be fun to kind of finally get down to business and really start getting in the nitty gritty of writing all that out.
What's your Twitter handle so people can know?
You can follow me on Twitter at @TonyFerrari because I'm the only Tony Ferrari that you'll ever need to care about.
The Tony Ferrari. Tony, thanks so much, man, for coming on.
I
It was
appreciate you.
Great as always. You're just a fantastic interview.
I try to do my best, boys.
Yeah. With your dollar store headphones, it's great.
With my dollar store children's headphones that I'm wearing today because mine are in my car downstairs.
Wonderful. Thanks for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. From first-round matchups to each Stanley Cup kiss, Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Scotty and I will be back with you guys on Monday. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.